What is margin in finances and why do you need it?
Margin is something that happens in your finances when you consistently live below your means.
Simply put, margin could be expressed as the money that is left over after you're finished paying all of your obligations and meeting all of your goals. However, we have a zero-based budget, which means that we give every dollar a job to do. So if you're like us, then sometimes that margin is a little bit more difficult to define, but finding it and knowing how and when to use it are super important parts of a frugal budget. Let's talk about margin and finances. But first, if you don't know us, I'm Hope.
And I'm Larry.
And this is Under the Median, where every week we talk about practical frugality. Margin for us looks more like, let's say, for instance, that we're spending $800 a month on groceries, which is a lot more than we spend on groceries.
Yeah.
But let's just say that we are. And we know in our heart we're getting everything we want at the grocery store. We're happy with that amount of money we're spending. But we know if push came to shove and we needed to find a place in our budget that had money that we could pull from that area in order to meet other goals, or let's say that something unexpected happens and we have to have some money in order to pay for something that's happened that was completely unforeseen. Those areas of margin, that's where you pull that money from. So in the instance that I just gave with the grocery budget, let's say we're spending $800 a month, but we know we could spend $700 and still be perfectly happy. That $100, that's the margin.
Another place that you can look for margin, if it's not obvious, is look at your goals. You can move your goals back a little bit or slow them down, pace them so that you can take that extra money then and use it to where you need it. And that will give you some margin.
Here's our best example that we always give when we talk about margin. And this is a real life example that happened to us a number of years ago. We decided that we would save money to pay cash for the home that we currently live in. Now, to be very specific, our first home was paid for, so we had all the money that we knew we were going to sell that house for. Yeah. We had some money already set aside to purchase our next home, but we decided to ramp up that goal and do it as quickly as possible. So we decided to go through our budget and find all of those areas of margin. Now, I was the unbeliever. I was the one that looked Larry square in the eye and said, "Gee, honey, there's not a whole lot of fat on the bone there because I've got the budget pretty tight." So he looked at me very calmly and said,
"I think we need to look a little closer at the budget." You know, Hope does a great job of categorizing all of our budget categories and allocating the amount of money that each one needs. But sometimes there's ways to cut back, even if it's just a little bit, even if it's 5 or 10%. If you cut back enough categories, now you've got some savings that you can work with.
This is one of the areas that we consistently get pushback on this channel. We have people that consistently say, "I don't have any margin. I'm living just within my means, just from month to month, from paycheck to paycheck, and I can't cut back anymore." Well, we've been there. Yeah. We raised 4 kids on a low income, and we know what that feels like. But we also know from experience that even with us, there were areas in that budget that were margin. We just needed to dig a little deeper to find it. Because in our story, I got the budget out and we sat down, and for about 20 minutes, we brainstormed ways that we could cut back each of our budget categories by just 10%. And by the end of that 20 minutes, we had a list of ways that we were going to cut the budget back, and we had several hundred extra dollars a month that we could then put toward our goal of saving the cash to pay for this house. So we knew that margin did exist, but sometimes, as we mentioned, a little bit more difficult to find.
We had to take a real critical look at it and look at each item and say, can we do without this? And we did without some items that we thought were important to have in our budget. We eliminated some of those and we cut back in an amazing amount so that we could save.
Now, cutting margin in your budget does not necessarily mean that you're cutting it out forever.
Right.
We knew with some of those areas, they were pretty doggone important to us, but we were willing to let those areas go for a while in order to collect all those smaller amounts of money together to reach a great big goal, knowing that once we'd reached that goal, we were going to add some of those areas back into our budget. So don't look at finding margin in your budget and the reasons you need to find that margin as being really super black and white. Like once I get rid of it, I can never get it back again. That's not the case.
And I think that was encouraging for us to think along those lines because we knew we weren't going to be doing without forever.
This is, by the way, the first time that Larry and I did what we coined the 10% challenge. It works so well for us that we have done it over and over and over again since that first time that we did it, probably 15 years ago was the first time that we did this exercise. We wound up calling the 10% challenge. If you're unfamiliar with that challenge, we have a lot of viewers who have done it and raved about it and said it helped them to save money in their budget every month and to reach some great big financial goals. We did a step-by-step tutorial on how to do a 10% challenge. So rather than address that in this video, I'll point you to the video showing right up above, and I'll also put that video, I'll link it in the description of this video. Let's move on to talking about why margin is so important.
You know, I think of the importance of having margin is the same as the importance of having gas in your gas tank when you're going on a long trip. Now, you may only need 7 gallons of gas to get from point A to point B, but you don't want to get to point B with only a few drops of gasoline left in your tank. You want some margin in there just in case you have to take a little side trip or somebody has to go to the bathroom or you have to go to the grocery store. You want a little margin, and that margin in a trip is extra gas. So that is the same as application in your budget. The margin gives you some extra money to work with when you need it.
It helps you to reach financial goals, which of course is the big example that we just gave. But it is a super important reason to just be aware of where those possible areas of margin may be in your budget, just in case you need to go in and grab them sometime.
The importance of margin is in this one thing. Our finances don't stay the same all the time. Your amounts that you have to pay sometimes will go up. Prices rise, and a little bit of margin in your budget will help you to carry you through those times.
Margin allows you to have super important things, 2 super important things specifically. It allows you to have adaptability and flexibility. It allows you to adapt, as Larry mentioned, to those changing prices, as we certainly have seen in the last couple of years.
It also can give you some peace of mind and help you to sleep very restfully at night, knowing that you have some flex in your budget to work with.
Margin can help you to avoid debt.
Yes.
Margin is one of those super important things that when something comes up, especially if it's unexpected and you're thinking, this is it. I am pulling out the plastic and I am done. That's it. I'm finished and I'm going to put this on a credit card. The whole idea of margin and figuring out where it is, and I cannot wait to hear you guys from you in the comment section telling us where those areas of flexibility, where is that margin in your budget? And if you needed it, do you think you know your budget and your spending habits well enough to be able to figure out where the margin is in your budget? Talk to us in the comment section. But yeah, avoiding debt.
Since Hope mentioned debt, I want to say one thing about debt and margin. If you're in debt and you have some debt on your credit cards or you have some debt on a car or on your home, and that's not uncommon at all, there's nothing unusual about that. If you can work toward paying those off, that automatically gives you margin in your budget.
Oh, I love it. Using margin to avoid debt, or if you're in debt, to pay off the debt in order to avoid debt. It's like a glorious circle, isn't it?
It is. It really is. A nice advantage to having margin in your budget is being able to take advantage of opportunities as they come up. Sometimes we'll go to the store and there'll be a closeout on a particular item and they don't care what quantities you take. And we're like, oh, what a great opportunity. I wish we had saved up the amount of money that we need to take advantage of that. Well, margin gives you that opportunity. You can take advantage of so many different opportunities that come your way if you have margin in there to work with.
One of the things that we do in our grocery budget is we deliberately create margin in our grocery budget every month by doing what we call the 1/5 tactic.
Yes.
And that is that we take our entire grocery budget and we divide it every month into fifths. 1/5 or 20% of the grocery budget is always set aside for stocking up and taking advantage of those really great deals when we see them. And if we have extra money left over in that margin, we can always roll it over to the next month's grocery budget, so that once again we're sort of accruing a little bit of stockpile money so that we can make sure that we have enough extra items in the house. And when you find those great markdowns, we can take advantage of them, knowing that we're not going to blow out our grocery budget.
So really, it's a nice tool to have at your dispense that you can put in action when you need it.
Margin is really, honestly, a little bit of a mindset shift too, because margin and knowing that you have it takes you away from that idea of I am living paycheck to paycheck. I'm always going to be living paycheck to paycheck.
Yes.
Once you know you have margin, or you've deliberately created that margin in your budget, then you can sleep a whole lot better at night knowing that you're not living paycheck to paycheck. You have a plan and you're working it.
Frugal individuals will utilize margin strategically in their budget in order to have places in there they can move money around freely to meet their needs. It's a wonderful tool to have in there.
But margin is just one strategy that we've used throughout the years in order to reach financial goals. We just did a video where we talked about 9 more strategies that are sort of a little bit like margin, and they will also help you to reach financial goals. If you're ready to watch that video, it's right over there. Go take a look.